So the Bucks season is over, and I'm gonna be honest, it doesn't look good. Like, my immediate reaction whenever a team's season is over, especially a postseason team, is like, okay, where do they go from here? What does this mean for the future? What are the changes they can make? Milwaukee's not in the best situation we've ever seen. Like, if you just look at the cap sheet that the Milwaukee Bucks have going into next season, there's not a lot of flexibility there. There's no cap space. At least they have, their core guys signed over the next couple of seasons. Thanasis is a free agent. We got to deal with that. Can't lose him. Go ahead and sign that man to an extension. But realistically, they have some of the role player guys like Pat Bev, Malik Beasley, Jay Crowder. These guys are going to be free agents. And apart from that, yes, at least they get to bring their team back. The problem is, the team wasn't that good this year. Like, I was critical of Milwaukee all season long, even when before they fired their coach, then they brought in Doc Rivers. After they brought in Doc Rivers, there was just something wrong with the team the entire season. And a lot of people, kind of went out of their way to say, oh, they shouldn't have made the Jrue Holiday trade, and then bring in Dame ruined the team. I don't even think necessarily it was that. I mean, yes, obviously that completely changed the roster construction of the team and the way that they would play, and obviously took away from a lot of their defensive strengths. But I think sometimes it's just a weird season. And I think that's what this was for Milwaukee. They were really good from a record standpoint. The first 40 games of the year didn't matter, fired their coach. Doc Rivers comes in, they get a little better, they get a little worse. They get a little better, they get a little worse. And then injuries towards the end of the year, now here we are. And trust me, we're going to get to some actual analysis here in a little bit, but sometimes it just is what it is. Like, sometimes you just have a bad year. The Bucks did. Now, is it unfortunate that their bad year happened immediately after one of the biggest trades in franchise history? Yeah, like, that's not ideal. Is it a bad thing that their bad year happened right after trading away any kind of future that they had in terms of future draft picks, and now they have very little ability to improve the roster? Yeah. Not ideal. But now for the actual analysis, right? In terms of the future for Milwaukee, Brook Lopez is a 2025 free agent. That's certainly going to be something they're going to have to deal with. And then both Bobby Portis and Chris Middleton have 2025 player options as well, which is really interesting because when they signed Middleton to the contract, a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, that's so much money. Why did they bring it back? It's actually kind of a fair deal. And now he's going to be able to enter free agency once again. And probably once again is going to be a very valued part of free agency. There are going to be teams that are going to want to get him. But again, that's not until the 2025 offseason. Then after that, you've got Dame in 2026. We got Giannis in 2027. By the way, I still definitely am not used to this. This is not shade at Giannis at all, but like just seeing players making almost $80 million on an annual basis in a couple of seasons, I'm used to what the numbers normally look like, and I'm just not used to this yet. And that's really the concern for Milwaukee, right? Is like, how can they continue to put together a roster where Giannis stays? Nothing else really matters. I've said this for years and years and years. You can talk about, oh, they had a bad season. They don't have control of the draft picks. They don't have salary cap space. The only thing you're trying to do is, one, you're trying to win a title. Two, you're trying to keep Giannis there and happy. If at any point Milwaukee loses Giannis because of a trade request or because of free agency in 2027, that is the most disastrous thing that could possibly happen to the franchise. So how do they try and put together a team that can actually compete for a title next year? Well, I would argue that with another year together, whether it be with Doc Rivers or elsewhere or otherwise, I don't think they're actually that far away. Like, they're definitely far away. Like, they're not on the Celtics level. But, like, I think the Dame, Middleton, Giannis, Lopez, Portis, some other guys, I think that formula can work for them. And like I said earlier, sometimes you just have a bad season. Now, the problem for them is in terms of all the other pieces on the perimeter. They knew this when they added Damian Lillard, when they added even more money to their team, especially in the long term. It's going to be extremely difficult to add competent pieces. That's the whole point of the second apron. Phoenix is going to be going through this. All these teams that are spending a ton of money, it's going to be difficult to add pieces on the edges of your roster, especially so when Milwaukee doesn't have control over a single first-round pick through 2030. Think about where your life is going to be at in 2030. Think about what you'd like to be doing 6 years from now. The Bucks still will have not had control over any of their first-round picks through that year, not just every other year. They have picks, pick swaps, everything. Everything is out the door in terms of first-round picks until 2030. I don't know if I even want to be thinking about 2030 because I'm not going to lie, I legitimately injured my back while sleeping last night. Woke up in the middle of the night, like sharp pain in my back. I can barely walk today. Just from sleeping. So as old as I am, I don't think I even want to be thinking about 2030, but here we are. Now, having looked at the cap sheet, thinking about the future draft picks, all that stuff, realistically, this is probably just a run it back year next year for Milwaukee. There are some other things they could possibly look into that we're going to talk about in a second, but the most likely outcome is that they just bring back Doc Rivers, they try and figure out some other role player guys, hopefully they're healthy, and they just run it back next year. Even as bad of a season as it was, honestly, at least it allows them to just kind of shrug it off and say, okay, maybe we'll be better next year. It's not like they completely imploded in the postseason. It's not like they actually had a really good regular season and didn't perform well. It was just a weird year. Speaking of weird, your face looks like that statue from Easter Island. Honestly, the first thing that came to my mind was this outstanding movie. I haven't seen it in like 10 years, but I liked it at the time. Okay, so outside of just running it back, what could Milwaukee do this offseason? Well, option one would be if they really hated the Damian Lillard experience, they could try and trade away Dame at a loss. They're not going to get as much back in exchange for him as they got, or excuse me, as they traded away when they traded for Dame last offseason. They are going to get some stuff, but probably not a ton of stuff, and certainly not something that replicates the value that Jrue Holiday specifically brought to the roster, which again means it's probably not going to happen. If they really wanted to, if they really want to try and tear some things down, get some more flexibility, look at maybe getting rid of some of the veterans, that's fine. That is an option. The other thing that they could do is they could, as I think they did last offseason, look at trading away someone like Bobby Portis, maybe Brook Lopez, using some of those, not small salaries, but smaller salaries, trying to package that together and see what they can consolidate those two guys into. I think that's something we're going to see a little bit more over the next couple of seasons in the league, as a lot of these teams are up against the second apron or up against the luxury tax, spending a ton of money. Guys like Lopez, guys like Portis that are productive and helpful for playoff teams might actually have decent trade value because they're not making $40 million a year and can fit into a slot that these teams can realistically afford. The problem is Milwaukee is also one of those teams. Now, I know someone has been thinking it the entire time. No, not that this is a fantastic shirt. No, not the fact that I'm not wearing a hat. None of that. I know someone has been thinking the entire time, Tucker, what if the big red button gets pushed this offseason? What if Giannis is like, hey, this is cool. Appreciate you trading all the future away for Jrue Holiday a couple years ago. We won the title. Appreciate you doing the same for Dame, even though it didn't work. I'm out. I don't want to be here anymore. Yeah, I'm going to put that at like a 5% possibility though, because he's still under contract for so long, and they still have had success there. I mean, it's not like this is a franchise that didn't recently win a title. Not like this is a franchise that is not won playoff series. Like, they've been competitive and they continue to do so. And unless he is just completely out on the dysfunction of the organization between getting rid of the coach and all this different stuff, getting rid of Coach Bud, then getting rid of another coach, then now having Doc Rivers in place, then trading away one of his buddies in Jrue Holiday to bring in Damian Lillard, unless he's just out on the Bucks as a franchise and thinks that they are too disorganized and they're just not going to be good enough to help him compete. Unless that is the case, I don't think the red button is getting pressed this offseason. I think it's getting closer. Like last offseason, I would have put it at like 2%, and now we're getting up to like 5%. But I really don't think that's realistic. It could happen. It certainly could. Things always change so quickly in the NBA. Certainly, Milwaukee is not going to be the team to press the red button. It would be Giannis. I really don't think it's going to happen. And so, sorry, Bucks fans, I don't have anything better for you, more exciting, more enlightening, but it seems like you're going to be getting another year Doc Rivers, another year Dame, another year Chris Middleton, thankfully, another year Giannis, and Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis. Like, I really don't know what else you can expect when you look at the way the team is set up. And you could talk about whether it was a mistake to trade for Dame or if it was just a weird season. You can talk about all that stuff, but the outcome, the result is probably they're just going to run it back, which I guess isn't super exciting for content. Obviously, if Giannis requested a trade this offseason, that would be insane. But if we're being realistic, that's where I'm at.